Welcome to this podcast of the message given at First Presbyterian Church in Fargo, North Dakota. You can always find a link to the sermon podcasts by going to www.paulhlang.com and clicking on the link to sermons in the header of the welcome page. There you will find an archive of sermons delivered at First Presbyterian Church. You can also use the buttons on the sermon page to subscribe to new sermons as they are posted, either through the RSS feed or by supplying your email address where we will notify you each time a new sermon is posted. If you are in the Fargo area, why not come and worship with us? You can find information about worship and program opportunities by going to www.firstpresfargo.org, or if you prefer, call us at 701-293-6311.
Please join me now in the prayer for illumination. Your word, O Lord, is our inspiration, our light, and our motion. Your word, O Lord, is power, is wisdom, and is comfort. Guide us today as we listen to the word, read and proclaim, and fill us with understanding and with the desire to change. Speak, Lord. Your people will listen. Amen. The reading this morning is from 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14, with an additional 4 more verses.
Yeah.
So the last 4, if I stumble, don't be patient. Naaman, the commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and in high favor with his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now the Arameans, on one of their raids, had taken a young girl captive from the land of Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my Lord were here with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his Lord just what the girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king of Aram said, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." He went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to give death or life, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of leprosy? Just look and see how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me." But then Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes. And he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, "I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and would wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar and the rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" He turned and went away in rage. But his servants approached and said to him, "Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you have not done it? How much more when all he said to you was, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. Then he returned to the man of God, and he said all his company. He came and stood before him and said, "Now that I know there is no God in all the earth except in Israel, please accept a present from your servant." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will accept nothing." Naaman urged him to accept, but he refused. Then Naaman said, "If not, please let 2 mule loads of earth be given to your servant, for your servant will no longer offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any god except the Lord. But may the Lord pardon your servant on one count. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow down in the house of Rimmon, when I do bow down in the house of Rimmon, may the Lord pardon your servant on this one count." Elisha said to him, "Go in peace." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So neat to see so many of you here when we're downstairs and it's a holiday weekend. Good for you. The faithful remnant, but not really a remnant. The faithful majority are here. So glad you're here. I have to tell you, this is one of my very favorite stories in the Bible. This is good stuff. If the sermon is not good today, it is not the Scripture's fault. It will be mine. So let me just mention that to you. Naaman is this great military man, a powerful man, but he has a serious problem. He has leprosy. That is a problem that will remove him from the courts of power. It will end his life. It will make him an outcast among those to whom he had formerly been a leader, and he is anxious. Anxious under any circumstances, by any means, to find a cure. The problem is everybody knows that leprosy is incurable. This is the source of his anxiety. What do you do when you have something that cannot be undone? This man whose life is defined by command and control finds himself in a situation where he cannot command obedience and is completely out of control. But his wife is attended by a little slave girl. In Hebrew, you are meant to understand this girl's maybe 10 or 11 years old. She's a tween. She is, in Hebrew, a natzarah. That's the feminine form of that noun. She is a little slave girl. Now, you need to remember natsar, because in a little while we're going to come back to that word. She is part of the spoils of war. You may recall that Israel lives in between all of the superpowers. Egypt to the south, the Syrians to the north, later the Romans and Greeks to the west. They live perpetually in this little strip of land that is either being conquered or trampled over as those superpowers fight among themselves. And there is a long-standing violent history between Samaria and Aram, even though you may recall that Abram and Sarai and all of the family of God came from Padan Aram, a little place in Aram originally. This little girl who's been taken in one of those cross-border raids says to Naaman's wife, well, it's a shame that we're not in Samaria, because if we were in Samaria, there's a prophet there who could heal him. And immediately, Naaman springs into action. It is an indication of the depth of his desperation and his anxiety that he is willing to go to Samaria for this unknown prophet to a vassal state. It'd be like going south of the border for peach pit therapy for some problem we have in today's world. But did you notice? He does not do what the little girl says. He doesn't go to the prophet that is in Samaria. What he does is go to his king, because he thinks to himself, I know how these things get done. I'm a man of power. I'm a man of wealth. You use your power and influence with people of power and wealth, and you get problems solved. So he goes to his own king, and his own king sends him to the king of Israel. Once again, we are working in circles of power among people of power, looking for problems that people of power could not and will not ever be able to solve. So the king sends him with a royal decree saying, I'm expecting a cure. And he sends him with several dump truck loads of silver and gold. 6,000 shekels of gold as a lot. And you realize later when he gets to Elisha's house, he did not just show up with a royal decree saying, I expect healing and money. He shows up with a long convoy of armored personnel carriers and tanks. That's what it means for him to show up at Elisha's house with chariots and all of the attending soldiers. So this little trip south of the border in the hope of getting curing begins to look an awful lot like an invasion. And the king of Israel is understandably upset, and the fun begins. The king reads the letter and tears his clothes and says, this has got to be a provocation. He knows I can't heal him. Nobody can heal him. What kind of craziness is this? On the surface, this is a story about the 1%. It is about the wealthy and the powerful. It is about kings and mighty generals. On the surface, the story is about the elite who control everything from the top of the pyramid, who are able to maintain the illusion of control through influence and politics and wealth and violence. But the Hebrew Bible routinely tells stories in which those who hold political power and military strength are shown to be impotent, and those who seemingly have no power are shown to be the ones through whom the work of God is actually taking place in the world. Think back to Exodus 2, when Pharaoh, the unambiguously most powerful person in the then-known world, declares that all the babies should be killed, and two Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, refuse to strangle the babies as they're born, and before the story is over, Pharaoh's own household, his own daughter, is complicit in the saving of Moses. You've got the guy at the top of the pyramid saying, kill the babies, and all of the women making sure this does not happen. Throughout the Old Testament, it happens again and again and again. The people come to the king in the famine and say, we're hungry. And the famine says, what do you want me to do about it? I'm not God. And then inevitably they go to Elijah or Elisha or some other prophet, and they are fed. At one level, this seems to be a story about the 1%, about a powerful military man, about a king, about a nervous king in Israel, and about the economics of providing health care to non-citizens. But at its core, this is actually a story about the work of God displayed in the actions of a little girl. A little slave girl taken, no doubt, in the most violent ways to a place she does not want to be, and held in servitude in a house of people she does not know. Displayed in the lives of a nobody prophet to a minor religion in a vassal state, and in the waters of a river so pathetic, you and I would more naturally call it a creek. I don't know how many of you have seen the Jordan River. It is considerably smaller than the Cheyenne. In most places, you could just about jump across it. You might be able to get your hair wet. So Elisha hears about the king who tears his clothing, and he says, hey, why all the drama, king? Just send him to me. This will be all right. So Naaman heads to Elisha's house expecting some sort of personalized care. He is, after all, a paying customer. He has insurance and all of the deductibles waiting. But Elisha sends out some unnamed CNA to say to him, essentially, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning, wash in the Jordan. And Naaman is insulted. I thought Claudia had just the right tone of voice. I thought I was going to get Benny Hinn. I thought he'd come out here. I thought he'd call down the Spirit from heaven. I thought he'd put his hand over this and do something dramatic. And I get this servant telling me to go wash in a dirty river that's barely better than a ditch. And so he turns away in rage. Once again, it is unnamed underlings who intervene with Naaman. You know, if he'd asked you to do something hard, you'd have climbed a mountain. Why not just go get in the water? And so he does it. He washes and is made clean. There's no big dramatic narrative about it. It's simply reported that he washes. And here's the fun part. His skin is made like a natsar. We Hebrew people are meant to chuckle at this. He's given the skin of a little girl. The story begins with a natsara, a little slave girl, and by the end of the story, Naaman has a little girl's skin. The great general has become like her, someone not nearly as in control as he imagined, not nearly as powerful as he wanted, made to receive the things he needs without paying for them. Then we get this curious story about Naaman's conversion to faith. I know that there is no God in the world, he says, except for the God of Israel. Let me pay you for your time. To which Elisha says, I don't want your money. And he presses again, no, seriously, let me pay you for this. And Elisha says, I don't want your money. So he says, all right, well, give me a couple of wheelbarrows of dirt, because when I get back home, I want to worship the God of Israel. And you know, the gods are tied to soil. So you got to have some of Israel with you when you get back, or you're not able to worship. But isn't it curious? The very next sentence is this. Just so you know, when I get back home and you see me on CNN with the king, we will be worshiping the God of Rimmon. And you will see me going into the temple and offering my sacrifices to Rimmon, and I just want you to know it's part of my job. The king leans on me at moments like this. Can you believe this? The nerve? The guy has just been cured from leprosy. The guy has just made, of all the most astonishing public declarations of faith, there is no God in the world except the God who just healed me. He has just stood before the prophet and proclaimed himself a faithful child of Israel. And the very next sentence is, oh, but by the way, you will see me worshiping other gods. He is immediately double-minded. His fidelity to Yahweh is mercurial. His decision to be faithful lasts only to the moment when it might cost him something. And when it looks like it might cost him something, immediately he caves. And if you are like me, you are expecting Elisha to curse him. You're expecting Elisha to at least give him a hard time about this, to chastise him for his lack of faithful behavior. But what does the prophet say? It's all right, go in peace. That's grace. I wasn't going to preach this part, but I'll just go ahead and do it. It's only a few more verses and we got time. It is a curious thing that the next sentence says that Naaman headed home with his truck full of dirt. And Elisha's little protege, Gehazi, decides, it's crazy for him to leave with all this money. I mean, he wanted to give it to us. So Gehazi runs after him and says to Naaman, the prophet's changed his mind. We will in fact take some of that payment. So he takes a couple of nice suits and a little bit of cash, and he heads back to the prophet. And when he gets back to the prophet says, what have you done? How dare you accept payment for this? And in fact, the leprosy that was on Naaman is now on you. That is a little cautionary tale for we preachers. who would like to work this system in some way that is personally advantageous. The gospel is not about getting ahead. And all of us who presume to be witnessing to the gospel and working the gospel in the world need to be careful about what we expect for our payment. Not just pastors, but congregations. So all of those people for whom we should feel no debt of obligation, they are in fact the people who've been attacking us and who've been carrying us off as slaves and who are our known and sworn enemies for decades, who show up in need of care, are precisely the ones that the prophet would have us heal. And even if they prove to be less than faithful in response, even if they are not adequately grateful, even if they are duplicitous in their mind and in their heart as they turn away from us, the response is not a curse, but a go in peace. So how does all of this apply to people like you and me who are about to come to a table to which you and I can make no merit-based claim to belong, to receive a miracle that you and I cannot conjure on our own or control in any significant way? I can see that Naaman's expectation about what the journey toward his moment of healing was going to be turns out to be completely foiled. Everything he expected turned out not to be true. And I think many of us who are coming to this table today are people who need healing in some part of our lives. There is some broken thing in us that we cannot make right for ourselves. And no doubt we have in our minds some pathway, some way that that is going to happen, and it will not surprise me if God foils our expectations and provides healing for us in ways that we do not understand or maybe even appreciate. And maybe, like Naaman, we come to make our public declarations of faith in a worship service like this, and in truth, we are all too often double-minded and wanting to hold on to our faith only until it becomes costly. And while we ought to do better than that, I think the word of grace is go in peace. Each day get up and begin again, trying to be faithful again. So, come. Come to a table of grace. Come to a place of healing. Come to expect from the hand of God gifts of God for the people of God. And if you cannot understand how it all works, simply marvel in the mystery of redemption. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.